They're not just in Kansas City, they're across this country. And not only that, if we think, oh, they're not in my city, they're not in my state, wrong, guess again, because they're at the White House, they're at the federal level. And if they don't touch you locally, they're gonna touch you at a national level. They can go to kcregionalhousingalliance.org/WS to register. They can join us by Zoom or in person, but we just need them to get there and to pass the word along to anyone else so that we can take care of people and make sure they don't get put out of business.
What's up, everybody? We are having just kind of a roundtable here with some local attorneys and Stacy, a local realtor out here. Stacy Johnson Crosby. I got Doug Stone.
Cosby.
I'm always going to screw that up. Stacy Johnson Cosby. I got Doug Stone and I got Dan Kennedy.
Kelly.
Dan Kelly. All right. So that's see what I had in my head. Right. So Dan
Irish.
Kelly.
You were in the ballpark.
Kearns. So I'm Irish as well. So you guys are both attorneys. Doug, what do you specialize in?
I'm an economic development attorney, do a lot of work at Kansas City Hall with, on behalf of developers, okay, residential projects, commercial projects, and the like. Cool.
And Dan, what do you do?
I primarily focus on landlord-tenant law. I do a lot of evictions downtown, ex-president of Landlords Incorporated. So.
Cool. So, and then Stacy.
Housing provider, realtor, investor, and leader of the KC Regional Housing Alliance. And we collectively, we're a group of groups, and collectively the membership of our groups represent over 100,000 rental units in the region. So we are the voice of rental housing providers.
Okay. And so we're here to have an open discussion with some of the laws or I guess laws, the laws that have recently passed here in Kansas City and what everybody's what everybody's upset about or what everybody's vocalizing concern about the direction of the laws that are happening in Kansas City. So recently, the city council voted to pass a voucher program, but the voucher program, I think every landlord we talk to is completely okay with accepting Section, at least for the people that I know, is okay with Section 8. But
if they choose to accept it, yes.
Yeah, but with that bill, there's some other kind of language in there, right?
So the ordinance that the city adopted really has a kind of a Part A and a Part B. Okay. In terms of the big picture, it's all cast as attempting to prevent what's called source of income discrimination. Okay. And so income can come from a lot of places. It can come from your job, but it can also come from tips, which are not well documented. Right. It can come from disability payments. Yep. It can come from a housing voucher. Right. Okay. And so what the city is saying is, money is money. I mean, this is what the city says. Money is money. It doesn't matter where it comes from. Yeah. If you have the money coming from a less traditional source, landlords, you have to accept that just like a wage. Yeah. And that can, create some consternation. There are a lot of regulatory hoops you have to jump through in the voucher program and the like. The other part to the ordinance, in terms of trying to eliminate source of income discrimination, is also things like reviewing a credit report, looking at a criminal history. Right. What can I do to vet my potential tenants? Right. And the city created a set of rules there as to what you can look at, how you can or can't consider certain things when deciding on.
So what can you not consider now in terms of vetting a tenant? Normally, when you're vetting a tenant, I'm going to explain the way we vet tenants normally. So when we normally vet a tenant, and we actually have always not cared about source of income because we realize we're a low income housing provider, and a lot of times people's income does come from SSI, disability, all these other things. But we do really care about the person, because the last thing I want to do is put someone in my property that's going to destroy it, or someone that's going to hurt somebody else. And people are people, and usually somebody who continues to habitually commit crimes is a criminal, and they're going to continue to commit crimes if that's what their track record has shown. Then they're going to continue to do that over and over again. If they continue to be evicted from properties, they're going to not pay their bills. If they're going to continue to rack up debt over and over, and that's their history, Banks make those decisions to not rent them, and all these things, and these are like choices, and those choices have consequences. So what does that bill say? Does it say that I have to rent to people that have a criminal record? I can't.
It's not quite that black and white. What it says is, if someone presents themselves with a less than stellar background, you have to at least consider what they provide for you to be their story. This is why, or it was 10 years ago and I've been never fined since then.
Right.
Now, you could put these in different categories. Crimes, a little bit different, right, than someone who had a rough patch financially and, and the like. And so, but these all kind of got lumped together in this ordinance. Dan probably sees, I mean, I'm not a housing provider.
Right.
Dan's a landlord and tenant attorney, Stacy's a provider. I'm sure they see this in their eviction situations much more than I do.
What do you mainly see evictions for these days?
Over 90% of evictions is just failure to pay rent.
Right.
And that's the leading cause of landlords failing, because if you evict someone, you're losing. You're not making money. It costs you money to evict. So the whole point of screening is to get a tenant in your property that's going to be successful, that's able to be successful.
Right.
But the biggest problem I see with this ordinance that's been passed is it's sort of set up in order to catch landlords so they can fine them. Because they're looking for, you're allowed to not rent to someone with a criminal record if you don't want to, but you have to listen to anything they want to tell you first. So if someone calls and the city, in the ordinance, it's set up so that the city is going to try and catch landlords. They're not tenants, but they're going to be calling landlords pretending to be tenants and trying to get them to say something like, well, if you just got out of prison, I'm not going to rent to you. That's a $1,000 fine.
Right.
But you don't have to rent to them, but you have to follow these certain steps before you reject them. And that's the biggest problem I see with the ordinance is it's set up in such a way as to catch landlords, and it's setting the city up to purposely go out and try and catch the landlords.
If I can say, that's the part that worries me the most, the discrimination complaint. So as a realtor of over 30 years, like one of the things that we always have fair housing classes. It's so important to us to make sure we don't violate those. And so we have that down pat. Yeah. Now what the city has done with this is they've expanded protected classes. They call it protected traits, and they've added source of income. Right. And so what my concern is that there are a lot of tenants out there, and we know behind this is a socialist, radical, activist group. They're not representing real tenants. They're a political group. And their goal is, like Dan said, to catch us. What they want to do is they want to make a statement. Their goal is to disrupt housing as we know it. Two goals. Number one, decommodify housing, which means housing is not for sale or for rent. That puts real estate agents out of business, and it puts homeowners and people who use real estate to create the American dream and create generational wealth. That messes us up. But that's one of their primary goals. The other one is to disincentivize speculators or investors. That's us. And they're doing a good job at it. So my concern is that in the end, socialist, they don't think anyone should privately own real estate. It should all be government owned. And that's their next move. And so my concern is they're getting closer and closer to that by putting these radical laws in place. And my fear is a discrimination complaint, because I do not want my name associated with discriminating, because I don't. But all you take is one tenant, this radical group telling people, if you get rejected for an eviction or for prior property damage, low credit score or credit report issues or criminal arrest history, if they reject you, you call 311 because they've discriminated against you. And then all of a sudden, I'm on the other end of having to defend against a discrimination complaint. And that's not a good place to be in business. It's not comfortable, because ultimately, not only the $1,000 fine, I could end up in jail for up to 6 months.
Right. So here's, like, I believe in common sense. I think everybody here believes in common sense. So with this, if this is a common sense bill, would the city hire these same people? Would they pass the city's background check?
They do have a ban the box policy they did put in place a few years ago. So they may, but that's their decision. This is our decision as business owners. Let me choose how to vet my clients and what I want to do with my clients to run my business.
Right. And another important point to make is that a lot of landlords don't have a problem with Section 8 tenants.
Yeah.
They have a problem with the way the Section 8 program is run in Kansas City.
100%.
And it can take 2 to 3, if your property isn't already in the program, it can take 2 to 3 months for them to come out and get through all the inspections and re-inspections before they'll start paying for that tenant. and you can't afford to have a property go vacant for 3 months.
Yeah.
So it's not a question of we don't like those tenants. It's a question of we don't like the program, and we don't want to be forced to participate in a program that's going to cost us money.
And that's the rhetoric that they used to pass this bill. They made it about race.
Yeah.
And they said simply that if you reject, because they said the majority of the voucher holders in Kansas City are black women, and if you reject the voucher, you're rejecting the woman, and therefore we're racist. Of course we're not. We're rejecting the voucher and the program that administers it, the Kansas City Housing Authority.
I love it when people use that. It's like the biggest like slap in the face to, I would say, an African American woman is saying that you're a racist, and it's usually somebody.
It's silliness. It's pure silliness, and yet it worked with the council. 10 members of the council believed it.
Well, it's a valuable lie, right? It's a useful strategy, right?
Yeah.
Almost anyone you're going to talk to is going to acknowledge that we have a housing issue in Kansas City.
Yeah.
Okay. The question is, what's the governmental policy to deal with it? And it's frustrating that the choice that the city council made was to impose a requirement. It didn't have to go in that direction.
Right.
Johnson County, Kansas, which is right next door to us,
Right.
has a program where instead of punishing landlords for not accepting a Section 8 voucher, it incentivizes them to accept the voucher. The county acknowledged what the challenges were to landlords,
right.
which for the most part were delays in the vouchers coming online, right? Between the time you rent to someone and the time you get your first voucher payment. And unfortunately, at the back end of leases where people don't leave the property in the best condition. And so Johnson County has a program, a financial program, where if a landlord agrees to go into the Section 8 program, then there's a pool of money available both for this gap period and as well for damages on the back end. That's a governmental policy that is positive in nature.
Yeah, and I think everybody would like to see the problem solved, right? Like, nobody wants to talk about this.
We're in business to provide housing. That's what we do.
You know, the funny thing is, and I'm not trying to talk bad about the city, but I don't even think a lot of times they know how to solve their problem, and it's right in front of them. Like, I look, and I've talked to many people, because we were out driving around looking for abandoned houses all the time, and when we look at them, I'll be like, probably 3 out of 10 that I see are owned by Land Bank, and they've been sitting there for years. And then when I talk to the people at Land Bank, and I'm not going to say any names, they're like, oh, we only have this amount. I'm like, you don't even know what you have. I would venture to guess there's thousands of Land Bank owned houses that could, if they were in the right hands, solve that problem right then and there. And you could give people a pathway to home ownership. If the city cared about solving the problem and fixing those problems, the old, what is it, the broken window philosophy of one broken window on a street, and that's where crime breeds, that's where all these houses get burnt down, people die. I've seen people die in houses, like fires and stuff like that. I've had houses burnt down next to mine that were Land Bank properties, and I've never seen the city act quicker and like.
The problem with Land Bank, it's inefficient, and not only that, but we always talk about the fact that as housing creators, the majority of the housing is created by people like us that own 10 or fewer units. No one talks to us. We're never at the tables. And so the city, about 5 years ago, they had a program for Land Bank. And you buy a Land Bank house for $1, and then you had to rent it out to a certain segment of the population. It was not a smart business move, because what they required is that you are renting to someone that earns $18,000 a year, and if a third of their income is going to go for housing, that's around $300 a month. Who is going to buy one of those houses you're talking about, put $100,000 plus into the house to renovate it, and only charge $300 a month for rent? The program went nowhere. Then they tried to renovate it again. And any of us that looked at that program looked at it and said, this is silly. And we looked at it, we said it. All they had to do is bring us to the table and say, hey, how do we make this work with Land Bank properties? And we would have had some ideas for them. They never bring us to the table. They think they know everything. And then the radical socialist group that's never created a single unit of housing ever is dictating housing policy at Kansas City City Hall.
Let me comment on that, because there's some who are going to listen to this and hear terms like, radical this and radical that, and think that we're we're responding in an extreme way.
There were what?
That we're overreacting, right?
Okay.
So let me give you an example.
Okay.
So the original ordinance that was put forward,
Yeah.
not only were landlords not at the table, but at the hearing, Ed Lowndes, who's the executive director of the Housing Authority, stood up and said, nobody asked me. Nobody talked to the Housing Authority about any of this. And here's why.
When it was time to write the ordinance, they had talked to them before.
Sure.
But when they wrote it, they didn't.
The ordinance, nobody went to the people who have the experience with the problem on how to solve it. So here's an example. So we already have discrimination sections in the city code. And instead of just adding source of income to the list of race and gender and the other things that we don't discriminate against, and then that would have just fallen in line with all the rest of the sections dealing with investigations and fines and all that. They didn't do that. They created a separate mirrored section, but instead of using the fine level, for example, for race discrimination, the fine is $500. Mm-hmm. In the draft that the tenants group put out for source of income discrimination, the fine's $1,000. So you look at the city council, with all due respect, and say, are you telling us that source of income discrimination is twice as bad as racial discrimination? I mean, that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
They took a provision that for other types of discrimination says, when you get a complaint, you conduct an investigation, and the investigation begins when the complaint is filed, and it ends when the investigation is concluded. In the source of income section that they created to stand by itself, instead of that language, it said the investigation commences when the complaint is filed and ends when the fine is issued.
Yeah.
Okay? So whoever wrote this ordinance couldn't even imagine that there might be a complaint that was unfounded and didn't result in a fine. So that was the mindset that was behind this.
Who wrote the ordinance?
KC Tenants.
Okay, so let's talk about the elephant in the room. Who is KC Tenants? Who's running that organization? What have they done since they've been involved here? Because I've heard, since I moved to Kansas City, I've now been here over 3 years, I've heard KC Tenants used multiple times as a bully, as somebody who's a powerful political organization, as somebody who, but the name itself says it's like a tenants union, right? That's what it is. But who is behind the tenants union? Who's pulling the strings?
It's a group out of Chicago, People's Action. Plain and simple, very well funded. So they're not a cute little ragtag local group like people think. The cute little homemade signs, the little T-shirts. Yeah. Absolutely not. They're very well funded, Soros funding by the millions and probably more than that. They're not just in Kansas City, they're across this country. And not only that, if we think, oh, they're not in my city, they're not in my state, wrong, guess again, because they're at the White House, they're at the federal level. And if they don't touch you locally, they're going to touch you at a national level. They are sitting at the White House with the president, and they have a White House Tenant Bill of Rights. So all of the radical socialist tenant protection laws that we're seeing here and across the country, they're in the White House, and it's called the White House Tenant Bill of Rights. And what the president told them is that if you can't get this stuff done locally, if we can't get it done in Congress, we're going to do it through our regulatory agencies. And so you better believe that all the regulatory agencies are trying to find a way to get the Tenant Bill of Rights and these socialist tenant protection laws into place at a national level. That's how it's going to happen.
So I always wonder, like, whenever you look at something, like we were talking about DEF from Diesel the other day, like, who came up with this law and why is it here? Like, so my question is, who benefits? Like, so if the organization is KC Tenants, how do they benefit, and what is the grand scheme here? Obviously somebody's...
Social housing. Their North Star, the one thing they want, social housing they don't have to pay for. Housing that is provided by the government, but taxpayer...
Why are they willing to put so much money? So as a business guy, I'm always like, who's making money here?
They're socialists. They don't like capitalism. We think capitalism, we think who's making money. They're thinking of finding ways to equal the playing field. The people who have the money need to give it to those who don't. We need all to be equal. Instead of lifting people up, they're trying to pull people down. That is their goal. We are the oppressors. And you're saving the oppressed from the oppressors. We're the profiteers, the gentrifiers, the racists. We're all of those things, and they need to correct the world from people like us.
So who is Tara, what's her last name? Ragbeer. Who is that? That is, in my understanding, the person who's behind KC Tenants. Is that correct?
She's the local organizer here in Kansas City.
And from research, she also lives in Chicago. So she has a house here and a house in Chicago. I know from hearing things, the reason, it seems like when I first got here, there was a tenant's bill of rights. So that happened, what, in 2019? Mm-hmm. And it seemed, and now there was something else passed, but it seems like bill after bill by this organization, they just keep, whatever they put up there, it keeps getting passed.
Well, when the Tenants Bill of Rights was proposed, there was also some of what we're seeing today as a part of that discussion, and that didn't see the light of day back then, but it just shows that, you know, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And so the KC Tenants incrementally are trying to achieve their ultimate goal. They know that they're not going to achieve it overnight. They're just going to achieve little victories along the way until it's really like the frog. You put a frog in water and turn the heat up, it doesn't feel it until it's dead.
Yeah.
And we're getting a little bit of that.
What the press doesn't talk about is they also were instrumental in getting Healthy Homes program passed in Kansas City.
That was more squared. That was before KC Tenants was really KC Tenants, so they don't get credit for messing that up.
And we explained to them at the time, Healthy Homes did not give the health department any powers it didn't already have, except for the ability to do annual inspections, but they don't do those. What it did do is it got the landlords to pay for the health department, because the health department lost a significant amount of its budget when the Republican administration came in and they cut funding to cities for health departments. And so they turned to the landlords to do it. And when we told them what would happen is the local landlords will sell to out-of-state investors, and the out-of-state investors are going to raise the rents. And that's exactly what's happened in Kansas City. And everything that KC Tenants has been able to accomplish has actually raised rents.
And limited supply.
In specific, in relation to the ordinance that just passed, as an attorney, my recommendation to my clients is going to be, you have to make everybody who comes to look at your property pay an application fee. In the past, what landlords did is they'd say, well, you're not going to qualify, so don't even bother giving me the $50 for the application fee, because I can, just from our conversation, I can tell you're not going to qualify. You should go find someplace else where you're going to qualify.
Yeah.
If you do that now, you're subject to a $1,000 fine. So you're going to have to take the $50 from someone who can't afford to pay $50 for every house.
And let the application run its course, right?
Yes. And you're not allowed to tell them that they don't qualify until you've taken their money.
It just proves that, like, I talked to somebody I know personally who's a county commissioner, and he told me, he said, we're at Christmas. He's like, Troy, you know we never say no to anything. We just pass everything. Half the time we don't even know what the hell we're talking about. And I'm not saying that the city council here does it, but I wonder how much do they read, or do they rely on the person that's pushing it and the way it sounds?
Well,
they don't rely on us, the people who know how to solve the problems. They come to us with an ordinance, and then we educate them why the ordinance is bad, and then they pass it anyways. For over, I think it's at least 5 years, we've been telling them the way to solve the problem of these at-risk tenants is for the city to come up with a bond program where they'll guarantee a certain amount of money on the back end if you have to evict that tenant. And that's going to allow landlords to take more risk than they normally would, because all a landlord is risk averse.
Right.
You want someone who's going to succeed, and that way the tenant benefits and you benefit. You can't afford to evict somebody. So if the city really wants to help these people, come up with a bond program, and if they're really good tenants like the city thinks, they'll never lose any money because they won't have to pay any of these bonds, but it will encourage landlords to take on people with criminal records, people with spotty history if they have an eviction in their past, something they normally would pass up on that risk. If the city was willing to back those tenants, that's how you get these tenants served. And we've been trying for 5 years.
Well, the current ordinance does create a pool, $1 million, right, for those types of claims.
But that's only for Section 8.
Section 8, that's different. And something else I want to say, Dan, I'm going to correct you on something. They don't come to us to ask our opinion. We go to them.
No, that's true.
We go to them. We literally, this particular source of income ordinance, I happened to see it one day. I'm minding my own business, working on my business. I happened to see an email from a neighborhood leader sending it around to other people saying, hey, you know, neighborhoods need to sign on and support this. As soon as I saw that, my jaw dropped, and I sent information out to the entire housing industry. Right. And that was, less than 2 weeks before it was to go before the city council. And so we have to go into reaction mode. No one said, hey guys, take a look at this, and from the housing industry, let's figure out how to make it work. If our real concern is this black woman that's a voucher holder, how do we really help her? No one did that. Instead, they put this punitive law in place, which is KC Tenants' goal. And I'll go back then to something Doug was talking about, the Tenant Bill of Rights. When that came about, same thing. We got less than 10 days notice before that was going before the housing committee at that time. And what we tried to do is mobilize our people to get them down there to talk about it, to testify against it. And we didn't have enough time to do that. And we convinced the mayor to do two things. We said, you guys met with the tenants, and the tenants got to meet with your attorney, Quentin. We'd like a chance to meet with both groups from the podium. I said that, and then he said, sure, that's fine. As soon as we finished, I go over to his attorney and say, can we meet with you? And she said, yes, sure, let's get on the calendar. I go over to Tara, the leader of the tenant group, and I said, let's get a date on the calendar to meet. And she said, Stacy, why don't you all stay over there and do your thing and leave us alone? Oh. So, and that was my first inkling that they did not really want to work with us and really represent real tenants. They had another mission and another goal. With that particular thing, we sat down and with Dan, like with the legal stuff, we met with the mayor's attorney multiple times to go through the ordinance line by line, and we got some of the things out of there and kind of softened some of it up. One of the things we got out was source of income. The KC Tenant Group, to Doug's point, they said, we're coming back again, we're going to do it again, and this is them coming back again. This particular time, we didn't have the luxury of sitting down with anyone, except we did go to almost every single council member to say, hey, this is not working, it's punitive. And the first meeting, we slapped down the information from the Johnson County Landlord Incentive Program, and we said, this is what we need to do. To his credit, the council member from north of the river, Nathan Willett, immediately looked at it, said, this is it. Within a few days, he drafted a resolution to say we need to have the city manager look at incentive programs, and then within a week, he got that passed. And then, of course, that ended up in the ordinance, which I know the Socialist group hates. They don't want us to have a single penny. The fact that there's $1 million for housing providers in that ordinance has to burn them up, but that's what we had to do.
Yeah. So why should people who are listening to this right now, maybe they're not landlords, maybe they want to be landlords, maybe they don't even live in Kansas City, why should they even give a crap about any of this stuff right now?
The main reason is that you're going to have landlords out there who are so scared of this ordinance that they're going to allow criminals to move into their neighborhoods.
And people don't pay their bills.
And yeah, people don't pay their bills, they'll get evicted. The screening process is going to result in more tenants who won't be successful. And tenants who aren't successful get evicted, and then you have property damage, and you have empty, vacant homes in your neighborhood.
Right.
And something else, too, they start with us, but it won't end with us. For example, in the original draft that Doug mentioned, they wanted to impact people who own properties that are selling their properties. And they wanted to tell them, hey, you can't negotiate the way you have before. If someone, and this is a real life example, so many people as agents, we know that if someone has a conventional loan, it's a little cleaner, easier loan versus a government-backed loan like an FHA, VA type loan where there are governmental regulations and all kinds of red tape and issues. They wanted to force every seller, anyone selling their property, not investors, anyone selling their property, to have to look at the FHA and the VA loans instead of conventional or cash. We couldn't say cash only or conventional only. You'd have to give the same kind of consideration like a federal voucher to the people with the FHA and VA loans. So they're trying to impact every area of our lives. Remember, they don't want the white picket fence. I saw her say that in one of the interviews. They're trying to destroy the whole thought of the white picket fence being the American dream.
Yeah.
Socialism.
Yeah, I going back to healthy homes. I've had encounters with them. We just had one the other day when it froze. We had one of our pipes burst. We put these people up in an Airbnb. And right when they got back into the house, they called Healthy Homes on me. And Healthy Homes said, and they went through the house and they couldn't find anything, but they found like a piece of drywall in the garage and a deck board that needed to be resecured and a couple other things. Well, it puts this tenant in such a power, and this tenant is like probably my worst tenant that we have, okay? But they weaponize that, and then KC Tenants, or not KC Tenants, Healthy Homes comes down and says, you got 8 days to make all these creditors. And then when you're talking to the tenant's like, I'm not gonna let you in the house. And so you're like, all right, okay, Healthy Homes, we can't get in the house because this tenant's refusing to us, but you're telling us we got 8 days to finish this stuff. And then you self-police and you self-report back to them and say, hey, it's done. And they never come and check it out.
Healthy Homes is just funding the health department.
That's all.
That's all it is?
That's all it does. It didn't give them any more powers than they had before.
And that's what we try to tell them. These laws already exist. You just don't have the will to enforce them.
The only real power that the health department has is to put the tenant out and shut down the building, and they won't do that for political reasons. So they really don't have they don't have the will to do anything. So really all it is a way to collect money from every landlord in the city.
Oh, well, that was the objective. It worked.
Yes.
And yeah, so I said, this is what I thought. I'm like, listen, Healthy Homes, that's the whole job, is that you self-police, right? So why don't, if I got a Healthy Homes and I'm on there, why don't I automatically be approved for Section 8? That fixes the process of it taking a long time.
Well, the issue is the decision is made by a different group of bureaucrats. Right? Because the housing authority and HUD have to decide whether your unit qualifies, meets the standards to be a unit under the voucher program.
But by being qualified on Healthy Homes and paying that fee, you are saying that you're a healthy home.
It used to, the reverse of that used to be true. If you were a HUD property, you weren't subject to Healthy Homes. But it turned out having annual inspections is no guarantee that the property's going to be in good shape. And the most public buildings that were in bad shape turned out to be in the Section 8 program. And so they had to say, all right, now Section 8 is subject to Healthy Homes as well.
In Section 8, they look for different things than the Healthy Homes look for, because Ed Lowndes misspoke at the podium when one of the council members asked him, if the property can pass the Healthy Homes, can it pass Section 8? And it's different. Section 8, and I use this example all the time of how silly it may be. You can have a pull string on a light fixture. If the pull string is broken, you're failing the Section 8 inspection.
Yeah. Smoke alarm, you battery chirping, you're out.
Yeah.
What? And I use this example. If you have one plug that's not working in that entire house, which I know in the house I just built, we just didn't have a plug that worked, I would fail that Section 8 inspection. There's got to be some common sense involved. So the reason why we're here is we're trying to make notice for whatever side people are on, and there's something coming up that you want people to be aware of, Stacy. What is that?
So this Saturday, March the 9th, what we're doing with Doug, with Dan, we have a property manager, Maisha Wright. We're going to talk about this law and what it is and what it means to people, because my great fear is that there's someone that's out there that's going to end up, KC Tenants will target us. They're going to target us, and they're going to try to make examples out of us so that they have data to use to talk about how horrible we are and we need more laws to punish us. Yeah. So they will be testing people on their own, having people call 311 to start the complaint process. So what we're doing is we're doing a workshop to inform our fellow housing providers in the city. Here's what the law is. Here's what it says. Yeah. And most importantly for me, here's how to protect yourself. And then so the property manager is going to talk about some of the processes you need, because now it's going to be different. Every single call you get, every inquiry you get, you're going to have to follow the standard procedure, because the end result may end up in a complaint, a discrimination complaint with the Civil Rights Department, and you need to be able to protect yourself when that complaint comes. Because my fear is if I turn someone away because they have 10 evictions and they owe $10,000 to their previous housing providers, and I say no to them, they're going to call 311. Stacy discriminated against me because I have an eviction. And then I'm going to have to defend against that. How do you do that?
So isn't there a conflict of interest? There's one of the council people, I'm not going to say the person's name, used to be on KC Tenants. Isn't there
There's one that, no. There's one that is a current leader of KC Tenants. He's one of the co-sponsors of this bill with the mayor.
Isn't that a conflict of interest, though?
There's someone, no, not necessarily. He's there, he got elected.
But if I have a business and I'm passing, you can call it what you want.
It's not the same. It doesn't inure to his personal benefit. So your example, if I own a business and I'm going to vote to give my business a contract. You're getting an economic benefit from that. This is a policy question, so it would not really be an ethical violation for him to.
If he gets money from that organization, doesn't that personally benefit that person?
But the legislation doesn't get money to the organization. So it's not.
The way they originally wrote it, they would get from the $1,000 fine, they would have been funded. That's another radical part of it. They thought that every fine, they would get funds into a tenant fund as part of it. That got pulled out of it. But that was their intent.
And there's just another law passing right now from this organization too. The language one I've seen the other day. Have you seen this?
Yeah.
There's a new a new law that says. And the funny thing is,
they're creating an office at City Hall.
Yeah, that's crazy. Like, so I'm like, anything that's getting thrown up there is just going in the hoop.
Well,
I wish I had a shot like that.
Kansas City is clearly a diverse community, and we have a lot of communities that don't have English as a strong part of their community. And so, I'm not going to say I support the idea of making sure that, regardless of what the law is, people need to understand what the rules are. And so
Google Translate.
I support. Well, sure, but no disrespect. You got a bunch of people in here who are tech savvy and the like. There are communities in our city that don't have that level of sophistication, right? And there is some, I believe, there's some role for government in making sure that citizens understand how government functions.
Yeah, but at that point in time, I agree with you. I think the purpose of that bill is good, but it's like, how many languages are there?
And
there is so many languages that we know that majority of people in the United States speak English or Spanish at this point in time. So, but there's Vietnamese, there's Chinese, there's different versions of Chinese, there's Cantonese, there's Mandarin, there's Swahili, there's all sorts of different languages. Like you can't just say we're going to serve these languages and not serve these languages and have it be fair. Like, because if I'm serving and saying, hey, well, I speak Swahili, and I can tell you, like, having traveled the country, most of the people in every country, the one thing that we all have these days is internet. Okay? Pretty much everywhere. And Google Translate. And I went on a tour in Italy just this year, and the guy's like, I was like, do you speak English? He was like, no, but check it out. And he gave the whole tour on Google Translate, and it translated it back to us. So that function, I'm not even sure if that one's, I would have to look into that one deeper to see if they're really going for that too. Is that really their purpose there? Because even though it sounds good, I agree with you, Doug. I think it's like, yeah, if I don't understand the language, I would like help. But again, where does that start and stop? Because if I speak Chinese or Cantonese, do you have a Cantonese person or do you have a Mandarin person? Do you have somebody who speaks Vietnamese? Do you have somebody who speaks Southern dialect? What if I'm freaking from Creole? You know what I mean? Do you speak Pidgin? I'm from Hawaii. You know what I mean? What about, who are they, like, sign language? You know what I mean? Where does it, I just don't know where we have to be so inclusive, where we end up excluding people because we're so inclusive, right?
So here's what you're basically saying too. Who's driving that? The same group that's doing housing.
Right.
And they're basically, back to the point, they're running City Hall, and they're people that don't have expertise in housing, and we're in a housing crisis. And so if we're focused on, as a city, we have homeless veterans that are out there. We have people, families and children that are homeless. The kids can't go to school because they have nowhere to live. Yeah. And so if we are serious about solving for homelessness, talk to the people who create the homes. And they're not doing that. And instead they're listening to, again, a radical socialist group that has no expertise in any of these areas where they're impacting policy. That's my concern. And so what we're doing on Saturday, we're going to have a workshop where we're going to be at the Plaza Library. We want people to register for it. I'll give you the website address. But we want people to register because anyone who owns property, who sells property, any real estate agents, God forbid, you sell an investor a property, then all of a sudden August 1st they end up with some kind of discrimination complaint and you didn't tell them about it. Real estate agents need to be informed. Every real estate agent sells in Kansas City, and every investor that does business in Kansas City needs to be at our workshop. We have plenty of room. We just need them to register. Also, people always ask, what is the next step? How do we keep this from happening? How do we prevent it? And how do we correct this? We're going to have State Rep Ben Keithley with us. He's outside of St. Louis, and he, separate from us, was already working on a source of income ordinance to ban cities from instituting those kind of ordinances that would kill the housing industry. He's going to be here with us. And something else that he's done, and I've noticed that he's very responsive. We have a lobbyist, his name is Epan Thampi, and he is in Jeff City, and he understands housing, and he understands how the market work, and he sees what's happening with the socialist policies. And so I created a list of some of the things that KC Tenants and the other tenant groups across the country, what they're working on. And literally, Epan went to Ben Keithley, and Ben Keithley tried to roll that into his legislation to say this is not working. When I went to Jeff City to testify, and I told them this is not just your simple source of income ordinance, it has all kinds of extra stuff in there that is going to be harmful to the market. They listened. And so the state rep is going to be there. Ben Keithley is going to be there to talk about his ordinance and what we need to do to support it, because it's going on to the Senate now. We need to make sure it passes out of the Senate. And so that means those of us who are in the industry and who want to protect private property rights, we need to find out what he's working on, and we need to support him, because it starts with the investors and the rental property, and then it bleeds over into everyone else. We need to stop this group's impact on policies, and we need the city council to wake up.
Yeah, because if you take a bunch of landlords out of the equation, like let's just take me for example. I came from out of state. I had 16 properties left in Vegas. And I was like, how am I going to find a good market? I looked at Kansas City and met with the city down there. I was like, they're friendly, they're nice, the Midwest people. We ended up moving out here. We liked it. But as I look at this thing and the way it's going, I'm like, I'm up on my investment a lot. These rules are draconian. I'll exit the market. Hasta la vista.
We did a survey, 55 this time. 275 housing providers in Kansas City, we asked them, if this law goes into effect, what are you going to do? 55% said they'd sell. And every time they did something with the healthy homes, we lost investors. And then with the right to counsel, we lost investors. And with this one, we will lose investors, because right now they're thinking, how do I get out of this hostile environment? Because I remember on the call yesterday, Sam Alpert, he said, and he's been in housing forever, he says, capital goes where it's invited, and it stays where it's welcome.
Somebody I liked whoever said that.
That was Sam Alpert. He said,
and
it stays where it's welcome. That's true, because we don't need to be here. We have choices. We can sell our properties and go buy somewhere else, just like you did. They need us more than we need them, and the council needs to wake up, and they need to start working with us.
Yeah, because, I mean, here's the reality is, like, you can go to lots of different markets as the taxes continue to get higher, right, in Missouri, and as the rents or the more things you have to navigate as a landlord, right? And then the other thing, I know you do a lot of evictions, Dan, right?
Yeah.
Now, if I'm a landlord, do I gotta pay you?
Yes, you do.
What if I'm a tenant?
No. No matter how much money a tenant has, they get a free attorney.
So there's a thing in the law.
By the way, hear that again. No matter how much money the tenant has. So that we're not talking about protecting the indigent.
It's not need-based.
It's not need-based.
So if I'm a tenant and I make $1 million a year, do I get free landlord stuff?
You get free attorney.
Taxpayer, it's not free, we pay for it. Taxpayer funded.
Free to them attorney.
What about the landlord?
No, landlord either has to pay or represent himself.
So is the assumption that all landlords are rich?
Yes.
And that's the goal.
Okay.
It's also the assumption that every landlord owns their property outright, and every penny of rent is profit. That's how the industry is perceived.
And those may be our goals, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Can I ask I don't have any idea where this question is going, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Where does the tax dollars from a house go? Like, specifically, do we know?
You mean
Oh, sure.
Property
Sure.
tax, you mean?
Yeah, where does our property tax dollars go?
Every property tax bill is made up of individual levies, right, impositions made by political bodies who have the power to tax. School district,
Okay.
a library,
Right.
okay, the state, although it's minimal, mental health, the county,
Okay.
county roads. In a lot of more rural areas, the roads, county roads can be funded by property tax. We don't see that as much here in the city.
Right.
But if you go outstate, there'll be county road levies, things like that.
But the majority go to school districts.
Usually the school district is around 55% of the total.
Right. Yeah. So, as a landlord, does this make you want to buy more properties here, or where's your head at? Are you like, I'm out of Kansas City, I'm going to buy?
Yeah, no. I've put investing in Kansas City on hold, and typically what's been happening in the previous years is people are looking to the surrounding municipalities like Lee Summit or Raytown or
Independence.
But lately it seems like what Kansas City does is filtering out to the surrounding things as well. So I think it's discouraging investment, local investment in the Metroplex in general.
That's why we have to stop it here. We have to stop it before they stop
Because
housing.
most of my clients who have sold to not only out of state, but sometimes out of country investors. And the first thing they do is raise all the rents.
That happened to us. When we sold, after right to counsel went into effect, when the city was willing to put $2.5 million, to allocate $2.5 million to pay for these attorneys for people who, 90% of who were being evicted for non-payment of rent, when the city said we're going to prioritize paying $2.5 million for these attorneys at the back end of the eviction transaction when it's too late, instead of what I asked them to do is please put that money towards rental assistance up front, prevent the eviction, keep the people housed. When they said no,
that makes a lot of sense.
Well,
it does.
I mean,
It
help
does.
the people out. Don't have a fight.
But it didn't work. It didn't work. And then my husband and I, as a result of that, we said we're out. And at that point, we sold 13 of our rental units. Average rent $600 a month. Every single one was bought by an out-of-state investor, an out-of-town investor. And like Dan said, they raised the rents, and then they kicked some of our people out and raised them up. We don't have to be in this market. It's hostile. It's not attractive to be in. And people. And right now, we're planning our exit. Once we see if the state is able to overturn some of this law, where we're going to go after August the 1st, because we don't want to have to fight to stay in business. We're providing a much needed product, affordable housing. KC Tenants has not produced a single affordable housing unit ever. As a matter of fact, they cost the city housing. And so we're looking for an environment where a city or municipality is looking to create more housing and be serious about it.
So my final thought on this is when I hear the word tenants union, I hear political power. Do you think that they're planning at some point in time of charging the tenant to be a part of that union? Or I mean, because that's what a union. I mean, like a firefighter pays $280.
They don't need money from the tenants. They have the money coming from their deep pockets. They need them just for the political numbers to be able to say, we have 10,000 people in our tenant union, council member, candidate for office. You better listen to us because we have the people and we can turn out the votes. That's what they need. And they're knocking doors. They're doing all those things. So what we need to do is, in our industry, we need to be smart. We need to put people up for office that are in business and in the housing industry, and we need to support them the same way the tenants do and the same way lawyers and other industries do. We need to get some of our people in policy making decisions, and we need to be serious about it. We're not, and they are. So we need to step up.
They're very highly organized,
Yeah.
it seems like. They're pretty smart. The lady's Harvard educated, so she's not a dummy.
And it's just the
Just a
political,
socialist.
the political weather right now is blowing in their direction, not just here, but across the country.
Why is that?
I think the main reason is because people don't know how to solve homelessness, and the easiest way for government to do it is to put it on the backs of the landlords.
Instead of bringing us to the table, because we are in business to solve for homelessness. Without a landlord, someone is homeless. Without a tenant, we're out of business. We are two sides of one coin. We work together. We are in business to house people. And instead of bringing us to the table to talk about it, they bring they bring elected officials, they bring people in nonprofits, people who don't know the housing market like we do. They don't bring us to the table. We can solve for it. And we, as a matter of fact, have a voucher program, an ordinance that one of the council members wrote that is sitting on a shelf somewhere that's talking about how to solve for homelessness. We're not invited to the table.
How do you think you solve? I mean, because that is, I mean, obviously, the lowest part of the population, you raise them up. That's kind of the.
That's our goal.
That's the ecosystem of this, or that's how you create your best ecosystem. Like, you know, in schools, we talk about my kids. It's like, hey, you're not educating to the top of the classroom. You're educating to the bottom of the classroom a lot of times. And it seems like I don't think one person in this room wants to see people homeless. I mean,
We're in business to make sure that doesn't happen.
Right. And so how do you solve the homeless problem?
Nobody knows for sure. I think a huge problem with it is that minimum wage didn't raise for 20, 30 years. And you've gotten to a point where real estate as an investment has increased and has become more expensive, and the lowest wage earners have not increased along with it. And so government doesn't want to address the income disparity between the top of the economy and the bottom of the economy, and it's just outpacing the bottom of the economy.
And sometimes we don't need governmental interference. The best thing government can do is stay out of our way. What we did during the pandemic, we did this before in South Kansas City, the Cerner. We had one of the biggest employers in the state there. They called me. They wanted to do a job. They wanted to do something. They were about to hire 600 people in jobs that paid $15 an hour or more. No degree necessary. And so I said, we'll work with you, but not just with you. And so what we did is we did a job fair that specialized, that the only people that could participate in the job fair were people that, employers that paid $15 an hour or more. Mm-hmm. That's the answer. You don't need to raise the minimum wage. You just need to identify the jobs that are out there that are already paying $15 an hour or more, and they exist. So our job fair, we had over 400 people there. We were in South Kansas City in a church. During the pandemic, one of our members, Kim Tucker, who's a Mary Group, leader of that group, she said that she had a lot of investors who had they couldn't find workers to take care of their properties, make repairs, and do all those things on the properties. We did another job fair. We were virtual. Again, our focus were jobs that paid $15 an hour or more to participate. Everyone who came there, if you walked away with a job, it's going to be $15 an hour or more. What we found is most of those employers were paying $20, $25 an hour, could not find enough people, degrees not necessary, could not find enough people. So someone, and one of our tenants happened to be on one of our virtual calls, because we were on the call all day, having each employer come on. Yeah. What we found is if you're making minimum wage, you walk out with one of those jobs, you change your life. Your income doubles. You didn't have the governmental interference. We didn't need that because the jobs were there. We just needed to connect the people to the jobs. So that we can solve for that.
Yeah.
And so that I think that's not an issue.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that, go ahead. It's unfortunate that the tides are going this way. So last thought, Stacy, for people who are concerned about this issue, whether you're for it or against it, whatever the case may be, you're trying to help people get educated this Saturday, right?
That's right. And then the website, if someone wants to register, we're asking them to register. And by the way, we will have security on site, because we don't want any games with people. This is too serious of an issue. We're going to be at the Plaza Library, 10 o'clock in the morning. They can go to kcregionalhousingalliance.org/WS for workshop. So kcregionalhousingalliance.org/WS to register. And they can join us by Zoom or in person. But we just need them to get there and to pass the word along to anyone else so that we can take care of people and make sure they don't get put out of business.
Well, I hope that some common sense law, I think that this just boils down to common sense. Let's just use common sense, right? You can't pin this guy against that guy. It can't be us versus. That's their goal. It can't be us versus them. If we're going to solve something, I heard somebody say it the other day, it's we got to focus on our similarities versus our differences. And, people who are tenants, they should want to have the American dream and buy a house.
The real tenants do. Remember, this group, these are not real tenants. These are socialists, and they're political. Everyday tenants who are renting, trying to take care of their families, they're with us. They want the dream of the American dream of one day owning a home. They're normal. But this is a different group. These are not tenants. They don't represent tenants. We need to be very clear about that.
This is politics.
Absolutely.
This is not tenants. This is not.
And it's socialism too. And that's very clear. We need to be very clear about that. And it's a very different animal than what we're used to. And they're taking over. We need to stop them.
Yeah, I've talked to, just final word, I've talked to a lot of people that have moved here from different countries, socialist countries, and they say, you know what? I left a country like this before, with the way this is going, and I've heard that more and more again, over and over again, and it gives me concern for my children who are 10 years old, and saying and I've told my wife that, I'm we're not, as we move from Vegas to here, and I left Seattle, and you guys know what's going on in Seattle right now, it's the country's heading one direction. It's I always say, we're not just country shop, we're not just city shopping at this point in time. There's other countries now, and the USA is not the way it used to be anymore, unfortunately. And
we need to change it. We can't just give in and accept that. We need to change it because it's for everyone's best interest that we get back to where we were.
Yeah, I agree. I think 100%. So, guys, I think I appreciate you guys coming on. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts and putting yourself out there. I know that nobody wants a target on their back, and that's the goal is just to have real policies. Dan, if people want to get a hold of you and they've got questions about legal advice, landlords, and how this law can affect them, how can they get a hold of you?
Right now, I'm just redoing my webpage. I don't know the address. But go to Landlords Inc., and all my information will be there on their webpage. I'm still on the board there.
Perfect. Doug, for developers, and I know you work in that space a lot, for people that are going to be impacted that, how do they get a hold of you, Doug?
I'm at the Lewis Reich Law Firm here in Kansas City downtown, and They go to the Lewis Rice website and look for my name, Doug Stone. There's a way to contact me through there.
Perfect. And Stacy will put all your information.
And the website. Just go to the website, get there, and then we'll have their email address, and we'll stay in touch with them, and we'll stay in touch with them on next steps, because we will be back, and we're not giving up on our city, because too many people need us for housing, and we're not giving up on those people who really need us.
I think she needs to run from there. Like I said, like you're just so passionate, and you got so many good solutions.
I'm running for retirement. I'm running for the